I once took a road trip from New Hampshire to Florida. I had to stop at a hotel to sleep overnight when I was about halfway there. It was some old, somewhat dilapidated hotel that rested off the highway on a quiet road. There were like 2 cars in the parking lot, so there were definitely not a lot of guests. The lady at the front desk was very robotic and seemed bored with her job. She seemed to fit the atmosphere of the hotel perfectly. The lobby was full of tacky chairs and tables you'd expect to find put out on the curb. The wallpapers were all dated and equally tacky. Didn't matter though, I wasn't staying there for the luxury, just for the night and for the convenience. It was late when I checked in, so when I got in the room, all I did was take out my toothbrush and brush my teeth before jumping into the hotel bed. I turned out the lamp next to the bed and tried to go to sleep, not looking forward to the long day of driving I had ahead of me the next day. Suddenly, there was a knock at the door. I looked at the bedside clock to be sure that it was almost midnight. I went to the door and looked through the peephole. Apparently the peephole didn't work though, because I couldn't see out into the hallway through it. All I saw was black. I looked down at the crack under the door, but didn't see any outlines of feet blocking the light, so I opened the door just a little bit to peek into the hallway. When I didn't see anyone standing in front of the door, I opened it fully and then peeked down both sides of the hallway. It was clear, so I had to suddenly question if someone in this relatively vacant hotel was pranking me. I shut the door, locked it with the bolt this time, and went to lay back down in the bed. But then it happened again, a knock at the door. This time I jumped out of the bed, ran to the door, and checked the peephole again. Shockingly, all I saw was the empty hallway outside, but it hit me. This time I could actually see through the peephole. I unbolted the door and opened it. No one. I looked down both sides of the hallway again, and there was no one. This was where I drew the line. I grabbed the key to the room and went to the lady at the front desk. I told her someone kept knocking on my door, and politely asked her to check the cameras to see who it could be. She said they didn't have cameras in the hallways. Her reaction also wasn't what I was hoping for. She seemed very calm and disconcerted with what I told her. She said in a calm voice there was only one other guest in the whole building. Then she just stared blankly at me. I'm not sure how she thought her response properly acknowledged my concern or what she expected me to say, but I could tell she wouldn't be of any help with the matter, so I left her and went back to my room. I locked the door with a bolt again. This time I put on my headphones and put on one of those 10-hour sleep relaxation videos on YouTube. This would not only help me get to sleep, but block out any possible future sounds from whoever was deciding to mess with me. And it worked. For a while at least.
My name is Danny, I'm 22 years old, and this was the most horrifying experience of my life. I live and work in New York City, but I don't have a car, so my main mode of transportation is the subway. It was a Saturday night. I was on my way home from a party in the middle of the night. I did this about every other weekend, so I was completely fine with taking the subway alone at night. Walking down the steps, entering the underground without a soul in sight, it was always a bit chilling. This specific station was very tightly spaced. As I was walking, I could almost feel as if I were being watched or followed, along with the occasional echoing bang-type sound emitting from an unknown location. I was early for the train, so I sat on a bench and waited. This is something straight out of a horror movie. I heard this exact phrase. "Psst, over here, buddy." There was somebody standing on the tracks inside the tunnel, poking his head out and looking at me. It was a filthy-looking man, I'd say in his early 40s. He gave me a smile, a horrible yellow smile with at least 3 teeth missing, and I could tell that even from where I was sitting. I did the best I could to pay no attention to him, but he wouldn't go away. There was laughing coming from inside the tunnel, and then another disgusting-looking man stuck his face out as well. This man gave me a nasty smile as well, before telling me to come hang out with them in the tunnel. The way they stared at me though, their eyes wouldn't even move. It's as if their sight was locked onto me. I resumed doing the best I could to ignore them and just wait for the train. I noticed in my peripheral vision that one of the men moved away into the tunnel, returning moments later with another face. I had to look again. There was a third face, but this one was hunched over and lifeless. It looked like one of the men were holding the guy's face up. The sound of the train approaching felt like 1,000 pounds off my shoulders. I got up ready to board the train, but when I got closer to the edge of the platform, I nearly threw up at the sight. The two men were going back into the tunnel, but the second man in the back was holding something in his hand. A head. Just a head. Like a decapitated head. They disappeared from sight onto the side of the tunnel. As the train stopped, I got into the first car, planning on warning the conductor, but no later than after we left the station. I didn't want to be there a second longer. As the train began to move, I saw legs moving down the stairs to the platform, but that was it. I didn't get to see who it was, but what I did get to see, as the train moved into the tunnels, I caught a glimpse of a group of men, hunched up against the railing, inches away from the train window, and they were all looking right at me. I knocked on the conductor's door like a madman, screaming it was an emergency. He opened up and I explained what I just saw. He radioed to somebody in charge of the station, as well as another higher-up of the company, who I'm sure took care of it, or contacted the proper authorities or security, whatever. It seemed to take ages for my stop to come, but when it did, I practically had a hop in my walk from relief. I have since been to one party at the same friend's house, but I skipped that station. I decided it was worth it to take the extra long walk to the next station. I don't know if weird shit happens often in the subway at night. In my experience prior to this incident, it never did. But after this experience, I think I should say you should be extremely cautious when in an isolated place like a subway station late at night.
3 days ago, I had an encounter with one of those crazy clowns that everyone's hearing about lately. Most people are running into them on the road in the safety of their cars. I, however, had a much more disturbing encounter. I live in Massachusetts. My property is enclosed by trees with a long, winding driveway leading to the road. During the day, I was cutting down a drooping branch from a tree above the entrance to my property. That's when I first saw him. A clown. Or a guy dressed as a clown, I should say, walking down the side of the road and stopping very slowly right at the center of the start of my driveway. He very gradually turned his head to face me, body still facing the road. I had to give him credit, his clown costume was terrifying, the mask looked horror movie status. I chuckled to myself and smiled in his direction. Judging by everyone else's experiences, I was expecting him to start bluff charging me, but he didn't. He just turned his head back to the road and kept walking. I would have said something, but I guess I just didn't care enough. That night I did my usual locking up of the shed outside and shutting off all the lights. When I got inside to start making dinner, I thought I heard something coming from outside. I opened the kitchen window a little more, but all I could hear was the wind and leaves blowing. I shut the window completely now and resumed making the food. I almost had a heart attack when there was a heavy, aggressive knocking coming from that same window I just shut. My whole body immediately went into panic mode. I felt every body part shaking, and my heart thumping twice as much than usual. I took the knife I had sitting on the counter and brought myself to look out the window, but it was literally too dark to even see past the glass. Once again, I struggled to sum up the courage to do something I felt needed to be done, which was this time to turn on the patio light and go outside. So I walked over to the back sliding glass door in my kitchen, put my finger under the light switch, afraid to flick it, waiting for a good 5 seconds, and finally did it. The horror I was afraid to experience out there came prematurely before I could even step outside. The patio light exposed the same clown from earlier, standing right outside the sliding glass door, head tilted like a dog staring at me behind the ugly mask. I could have and probably should have opened the door there and then and stabbed the guy, or at least threatened him. but it's so easy to think back and say I should have done that. Instead, I simply ran upstairs to the telephone where I called the police. I could hear banging on the heavy glass door downstairs all the way up from my bedroom, and it got worse as the clown started pounding with both hands repeatedly as opposed to the slow and steady knocking he was giving before. It got the worst when the clown started screaming like a psychotic asylum patient over the sounds of the pounding on the door. I felt like I was going to die. Literally every minute that went by that the cops hadn't arrived yet felt like 5 minutes. The screaming and banging finally came to a stop when I heard a familiar voice outside yelling, "What the hell are you doing, and get the fuck out of here." I looked out the window to see Marv, my neighbor, walking over with a rifle in his hand. When I went outside to greet and thank him, he told me the clown ran off into the woods. The cops arrived briefly after that and took down my description, did a quick 5-minute sweep of the property, and left. Marv let me crash at his place for the night just in case. We don't play with shit when it comes to our well-being and safety. So yeah, at the time I'm sharing this, that was only 3 days ago, in the midst of all this clown horror.
This story just happened last night, and I don't know exactly what to make of it. Regardless, what happened yesterday will stay with me for a long time. I'm an 18-year-old dude who lives at home with his mom. We live in the same neighborhood as my grandma's house. It was a typical Thursday. I got home from work and had my usual routine. A shower, some video games, a little weed, and dinner. About a minute later, I thought I heard tapping on my window. The tapping was so low and inconsistent that I just shrugged it off. I felt slightly paranoid, so I turned on some music to distract myself. No more than 2 minutes pass, and I hear my back door open. We always kept the spare key in the lock, which jangles every time the door's opened. I turned my music off and sat in silence. I couldn't hear anything. I know someone just opened it. I know someone was inside my house. I could feel it, but couldn't hear footsteps, a voice, or anything. I grabbed the knife I keep in my desk drawer and sat in complete silence. I thought to myself that if I acted like I had the upper hand, whoever it might be will be intimidated or scared. I stood up and walked out of my bedroom, knife in hand. I don't know why, but I whistled just one note. I took a few steps forward, stopped, and whistled once more, still thinking I was acting tough, showing no fear. Needless to say, by this point, I was terrified. I was about to take a few more steps when I heard something that made a chill run through my spine. Someone just whistled back at me. Sounded like it came from the living room. I was frozen in fear. I peered around the corner and saw nothing. The door was closed, but unlocked. I don't know if it was me who left it unlocked. I truly couldn't remember. Knife or not, I was extremely scared and ran back to my room. A few minutes pass, and the door opens again. My mom is back. I don't know why, but I didn't say a word to her about just what happened. I have no idea who it was, where he was, or if he ever left.
I live in a place called Polk County, a county in Central Florida whose reputation definitely precedes it. So one day, cruising around North Lakeland, me and some friends found what seemed to be the biggest abandoned building any of us had ever seen. Us being stupid teenagers decided to go smoke some weed and play manhunt inside. When I describe this place, I can only think of the words eerie and morbidly terrifying. We didn't care though. It was the coolest thing we'd ever seen in our small town lives. But to get to the story, we were going down a corridor with a dead end. We got to the end room and we heard what sounded like a metal pot get thrown in the hallway. Terrified, we all grabbed whatever's closest to us for a weapon. The only suitable weapons in that damn room were a stack of canned beans. So we all grabbed a can of beans and ran down the hallway to the exit side. You have no idea the things going through my head at this point. The scary part is, we checked every room in that hallway. After a few seconds, a voice calls out. We exchange some words with some guy and finally he says,
"You want a cigarette?"
My friend, being an idiot, says, "Oh, he's chill, come on," and start walking down the hallway back to the guy. I called him an idiot and he agreed, so then we started leaving. We came through a window in a room near the end, so as we were walking back into that room, I was the last one in. I kid you not, I look up as everyone get in the door, and I see a man start around the corner at the other end of the hallway. My heart stops. He's got something in his hands, and I look down and it's a handsaw. So I burst into the room and the first person isn't even out of the window yet. So I'm shoving everyone out the window. They all have no idea what's going on and I had no time to explain. I just said to run. So everyone gets out and I'm the last one climbing out. I'm halfway out and I look back at the door and there he is, standing right at the entrance. It's the scariest thing to ever happen to me, hands down. So, when I was young, I went to that one house in town where the residents went all out and probably spent thousands of dollars getting the place perfect for Halloween. I remember feeling terrified even with my double lightsaber. Even though I was scared to death to walk through it, I always admired the workmanship. So, as I nervously crossed the yard, past flying banshees and impaled corpses, I noticed the main attraction at the end of the line. There, on what I guess was probably the driveway, was a bottomless pit attraction. The illusion bewildered and chilled me. I must have stared at it for a while when suddenly I heard a cough and a low hushed voice to my right. I don't remember what was said, but I want to say it sounded something like,
"Hey, check this out."
or
"Hey, I want to show you something."
in a gruff, hoarse tone. I looked over and at first saw nothing but the wide gate to what was clearly the inside of the owner's house. There was just a faint amount of the light from the glowing pit to illuminate the outlines of the gated fence. After adjusting my eyes, I noticed a figure standing completely still. In fact, it was so still, I remember thinking it was just another static prop. My young mind just didn't register a lot of this and was still looking for the voice I heard, not realizing it had come from the figure who I could still only barely make out. After a few moments, I heard the voice again. I realized it came from the figure and began to approach it. This was obviously a stupid idea, but in comparison to everything else that was happening around me, this figure seemed anything but imposing. So I cautiously approached the figure, trying to make sense of it. Suddenly, the figure began to move and consequently, I froze solid. The light from the amber glow lit up its face just enough for me to make out its features. This, I remember clearly. He was a scraggly and rough-looking man with a coarse, gray beard and yellow teeth. His weathered and tattered clothing looked like it hadn't been cleaned in ages. Though I had no idea why,
but it unsettled me greatly under the hellish glow of the light bulb behind me. It felt wrong. It was as if that moment I had acquired some clarity and realized his presence here obviously was not part of the show. And considering I already saw the owners clearly did not belong on the property, I screamed and ran out of there as fast as I could to the exit, not looking behind for a second. I probably got a few looks from the kids around, but I never went there again.
I was walking from a friend's house to meet my son's father at a bar we frequented in those days. It was winter, icy and snowing with giant piles of snow all around. I was walking from a friend's house around 9 p.m. down an alley that served as a driveway area for many houses. I was wearing my apocalypse boots, waterproof, knee-high, and just winterproof in general. I usually have headphones in blaring music while I walk, but that night, for some reason, I decided not to. In hindsight, that is what saved me. There's a younger guy, early 20s, walking about 50 feet behind me.
Hey, you!
I turned around and it seems he's talking to someone else.
Hey!
I look back and then continue walking.
Yeah, you!
I start to walk faster as I realize he's getting closer. Ahead of me, I see an SUV running, backed out of a parking spot but blocking my path. I turn around and there's another guy. The door to the SUV opens and there's a couple of guys in it looking at me. One gets out and stands by the door. I turn to look at the guy behind me, and out of nowhere, about 5 more guys come out, surrounding me from a distance and slowly closing in. The realization that they were hiding behind piles of snow hits me. I realize that they're just standing there watching me. A couple of them had their phones out and were recording something that was about to go down. They were closing in on me, trying to get me to walk to the SUV. Fight or flight kicked in and I decided I didn't want to know what was about to happen. I wanted to catch them off guard, so instead of running forward, I bolted to the left. I ended up cutting through a few yards and safely made it to the bar.